Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, the spy game is a tricky one, even for an ordinary Joe, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things over here, and I'm assuming you do, you're listening to the podcast right now, you can subscribe to us basically wherever you find your podcast. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google. It's all good. And plus, every single one of our episodes is archived over at our YouTube channel. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you'd follow us on social media. You can do that on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest movie news, reviews, a bit of television, basically anything about the moving image into the sun, because that's what we love to talk about, and we love it when you read about it. So please come on by, and we certainly would appreciate it. On this episode, we got a good one. It's a little late, but we got a good one. We're talking about the new film, The Courier, which is on premium VOD now, from our friends over at Elevation Pictures. It's a spy thriller starring Benedict Cumberbatch, and it's a true life spy thriller because it's the story of an unassuming guy, just a British businessman, Greville Wynne, who is recruited into one of the greatest international conflicts in history and becomes a spy, and he forms this covert and dangerous partnership with a Soviet officer, and he's being handled by the MI6 and a CIA operative to provide crucial intelligence that's going back and forth between the sides, and plays a key part in helping to defuse the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is a true story, and it's a fascinating one. And we got the chance to sit down with director Dominic Cooke to talk about just the spy thriller genre in general, working with Benedict again, and just, you know, what draws us into the genre and what draws us into sort of the everyman story, because Benedict is so talented at playing either everyday guys or playing superheroes, as we've seen in a myriad of films. But I do recommend, if you're looking for something that would have been in the theaters right now, but we don't have theaters, we will soon, but not quite yet, I do recommend you go rent it on your favorite VOD, ESD platform, as it were. And you can listen with our talk with Dominic right now, though, because it's a good one, and I hope you enjoy. All right, well, I mean, obviously, first off, thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Not at all. My pleasure.
Now, congratulations on the movie, and I mean, I will fully admit, I'm a bit of a sucker for these stories. I absolutely love them. Walk me through sort of when you discovered the story of Greville.
Well, actually, I was just sent the script in a first draft, and when I started reading it, I had no idea it was a true story. There was nothing on the script that said it was. So I was sort of hooked into the story, and then, of course, as soon as I got to the end, I Googled it, discovered that it was a true story. So, and then I got sort of obsessed by the reality of the story, and there's so many elements to it that unfortunately we had to leave out of the movie. There's another sort of 4 movies in there. Yeah, I didn't really know about it, and Tom had found out about the writer and had done a sort of huge amount of research. He didn't really base it on a particular book. It was all in the public realm. But my parents' generation, if you speak to anyone in the UK above a certain age, they know who Greville Wynne is.
What is it about sort of stories from this era that I don't like? I don't know. They seem so compelling. Like, there's so many different stories and so many different angles that we're getting these world events from. Like, I mean, I literally did not know who the man was until I saw your film.
No, I mean, there are very interesting reasons as to why the story sort of got shut down by MI6. But yeah, I think it's just the level of sort of the huge gap between appearance and reality, you know, and the stakes, which were huge. I mean, you know, I sort of grew up during the last bit of the Cold War, and I sort of remember, I remember the events at the end of the 80s, sort of feeling a certain sense of disbelief that it had collapsed, the Soviet Union, because it seemed like it was going to last forever. There was no sense in the world that those two sort of completely opposing worldviews were going to disappear. Or at least one of them was. So there's sort of almighty stakes of a story like this, but then there's also that sort of the way that people manage to live these double lives, and if you look at people like Kim Philby, the level of deception that a lot of these people sort of lived through was incredible. I mean, family members, wives, no one knowing what they were really about, and that's really interesting, I think.
No, for sure. And I mean, I think that comes out so well in Benedict's performance. And I mean, he has this ability to sort of, on one spectrum, be a superhero, but on the other end, be sort of a bit of a nobody. I mean, at the beginning of the film, he's a bit of a nobody. And I'm kind of curious, for you as a director, what is it like having this actor who can sort of run this entire spectrum? Because I mean, I've got to imagine it's a bit of a treat for you to be able to sort of take the entire journey and take it so effortlessly.
Well, we know each other pretty well because we've done a few projects together before, and not on film, but in theatre and television. And so when I read the script, I was sort of only a few pages in when I thought, well, this would be very good for Benedict. So I was looking for the chance to work with him again because he is exceptional. I think one of the challenges with Benedict actually is making him not be too interesting at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because I think he's a sort of magnet for sort of extreme sort of states, and he likes looking out the sort of odder sides of characters. And we really needed to find someone who was an unusual guy, actually, Greville Wynne, as it turned out, but sort of who was sort of mildly dissatisfied with life in the way that many middle-aged people are, and to make sure that there wasn't anything sort of outlandishly strange or unusual about him, and getting him to just play that sort of reality so that he could then find the change. So actually that was the only challenge, because he's got a sort of eye for the unusual in a character, and that's what he wants to play all the time.
And I mean, I also love how the film, like, as much as it's about these people in close quarters, passing notes and spies and all this, it still felt very big and felt very sort of cinematic in a way. And I mean, I particularly love just even sort of the driving around shots of London in the 60s, or sort of these sweeping crane shots in Russia. Can you talk a little bit about just trying to sort of craft a very sort of big but still intimate mood for the film?
Well, I think, one of the things that it struck me about the script when I first read it was that it's very much about sort of individuals, sort of these minnows in a really large canvas. And I suppose we wanted to play that. We wanted to sort of avoid the obvious sort of cliched version of London looking one way and Moscow looking another. I mean, they do look different, right, but we didn't want to sort of shoot them very differently. We wanted to actually shoot them in the same way and sort of tell the story that these two men were both sort of fish out of water in a way. Both of them were at odds with the society they lived in for various reasons and didn't really feel like they were part of what was going on around them. So we sort of echoed that in the way we shot the movie, and we used, sort of big, we used a very wide screen ratio, and we used sort of quite epic shots of, well, actually it was a sort of cheated Moscow. We were going to go and shoot, we shot a lot of it in Prague, and then we were going to shoot in Belarus for a couple of days, and that's amazing because it's a real sort of Stalinist architecture there, but we managed to get that scale, and we tried to get that with London too. So you sort of felt these two sort of small men were playing out something massive,
Well, I mean, I suppose, especially for you, it might be a bit of a marriage between sort of the cinematic and the theatrical, because I mean, conversely, there are some moments that felt very set up for the stage. I mean, particularly towards the end of the film, that felt very intimate and felt very sort of intense. Like, how, I guess, maybe fun is it for you to sort of be able to play and sort of jump back and forth when you're telling a story like this?
Oh, I suppose I don't sort of think in those terms. I suppose I think more just about what the scene really requires for the audience, I suppose. And I think in those terms, I mean, obviously you have the joy of a camera in making a film, and theatre you have to sort of bring the audience close through other means. And it's actually quite hard sometimes if you're in a big theatre to get an audience to feel anything. But when you've got a camera, you sort of does make your life easier. So, and Sean Bobbitt, our cinematographer, and I were very sort of, I suppose we have, is it old fashioned? I don't know, but we sort of have this view that we share a view that, films should largely be made in the camera. And that, there are too many examples. I think it comes from television, really. of sort of head and sort of not good stuff. Obviously some great, very visual television, but sort of the standard, multi-camera television where it's head and shoulder shots, and it's just not shot very imaginatively. So we always tried. We've done 2 films together now. We tried to sort of make sure that the shots were articulate, that they made the audience feel a particular way about the situation or character. And we sort of have a rule that we do it in the minimum number of setups. So we're sort of not shooting with an insurance policy. We're not shooting with, let's have the traditional way, which is, wide, medium, close up. We didn't really do that ever.
Right. Now, when audiences get a story like this, they always feel like they're getting facts. But I mean, the reality is obviously the truth won't always necessarily fit the structure of a film. And I'm kind of curious on this one. How much did you have to tweak it, and how much of it is true to sort of the actual life of Greville and what happened?
Well, it's compressed, obviously, and that is the challenge of making anything based on real life. It's always going to be compressed. I mean, even if you did, an 8-part TV series, you'd be leaving stuff out. And I think the art of it is working out what story you're going to tell, right? So it's not about sort of just shaving bits off the whole story. And I think sometimes people do that and it doesn't work. I think you've got to sort of go, okay, so our version of the story is this. And, what I liked about, the way that Tom had approached it, because although we rewrote it, his script is sort of in its heart the same thing as it was in Your Heart, which I really liked, because I hadn't really seen that within the sort of spy genre. Often because you're dealing with calculation in those stories, they could be quite cold, the stories, whereas what I loved about this was it was sort of more intimate and more private. And in fact, the film it most reminded me of when I first read it was Brief Encounter, because it's about this incredibly intense and transformative friendship, ultimately, that's almost like an affair in its intensity. And the way that Brief Encounter is about this amazing relationship that no one else knows about, well, it's similar with these 2 guys. And I think that is very, very true to what happened. Greville Wynne wrote a few books, and they were very embellished. They're embellished because he was trying to make a bit of money to survive,
right?
And he sort of pimped up his sort of espionage story. But what really rings true when you read the books is the sort of profound admiration he had for Penkovsky, and that these were 2 guys who I don't think they'd ever quite had a friendship like that, and they sort of recognized something in one another. They sort of complemented one another, and they had a sense of mission. And I think that was quite a transformative and powerful thing for both of them. So in that sense, we were very true. There's certain events where you have to sort of go, we're going to have to compress that. We're going to have to put that. That was the approach we took.
This really feels like one of those underappreciated spy stories that come out of the Cold War, and it made me sort of reminisce for Sir Alec and Tinker Tailor. And I'm kind of curious, you mentioned Brief Encounter. What is it like? What recommend to audiences, like maybe somebody who wants to get into the Courier or something else, like sort of an underappreciated spy film?
I'm not a real expert on this genre, but we looked at movies, particularly from the period, and I absolutely loved The Spy Who Came In From the Cold.
Oh, brilliant!
It's an incredible film, Richard Burton, and it's so funny, isn't it, how slow things seem to us now when we watch old movies. I mean, we've been at home in the lockdown. We've been sort of doing genres, or periods or actors in a sort of block and watching all their movies. And at the moment we're sort of in an 80s phase, which has been very interesting. And actually, when you watch 80s movies, there are so many good movies made in the 80s. It's extraordinary, but they do seem slow. And it takes a while for you sort of slow down and get into and enjoy the detail that you find when something is a bit slower than what we used to. And The Spy Came to the Cold seems incredibly slow, and the camera sort of moves at this sort of glacial pace, but it's a brilliant sort of psychological movie about that time, and it's hard, sort of hard-edged. So I think that's my favorite of the genre. I mean, I loved Bridge of Spies more recently. I think that's a great one. But I'm not a sort of great connoisseur of the form. I enjoy the movies, but I'm not sort of, I think the thing about this, the difference with this one was the heart, in a way, that it had. And I'd love to see more. I read a wonderful book about Kim Philby, which about 5 years ago by a guy called Ben McIntyre, which I think is actually being made into a TV series. And in that book, it is sort of jaw-dropping, the level of deception. I mean, I can't imagine how these people actually lived. And I think that's really underexplored, actually.
No, and you know what? You're absolutely right, because I mean, the politics have been explored left, right, and center, more times than we can count. But the people behind it all who had to live it and go through it, these really incredible times, is what makes these stories interesting. I think it's what makes your film interesting. And I just want to say thank you again for the time today, and
my pleasure.
to get on the film.
Really nice to talk to you, David. Thank you.
Nice talking to you. And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.